So welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Holler. I am the VP of Communication for Seminole County Council PTA, and I'm super excited to welcome Jania Fuller and Ron Mendoza from Seminole County Public Schools Student Support Services, and they are here to go over with us implicit biases, kind of what that means and how we can work to overcome those in our lives. So I will hand it over to you guys.
Right. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Seminole County Council PTA for having us. Ron and I are super excited about having this conversation and continuing this conversation. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Sure, I've got that. All right, so you should be able to see the front. Yes, Rachel, Ron, let me know.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, awesome. All right, so like I said, welcome to our implicit bias conversation. My name is Jania Fuller. I am one of the district school social workers. I currently work in the Families in Need department with our homeless, foster students, and then also our economically disadvantaged students.
And my name is Ronald Mendoza. I'm one of the district mental health counselors. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So a lot of my background is, social work based with a mental health focus. And I've been with SCPS for about 2.5 years. And before that, a couple different places in the community, mainly working with children, families, and mental health.
All right, so let's talk about our goals for tonight's conversation. The first goal is definitely just to start this conversation. When we talk about implicit bias, we talk about cultural competency, it definitely is a conversation that is continuous and ongoing. And so by no means at the end of this will we know every single bias that we have and how to address all of them, but we will at least start doing some of that work.
Yeah, definitely. Right. At the end of it, we're not going to get a certificate, and that proves we're no longer implicitly biased moving forward. I think it's something I'm going to be working on for a while.
Yeah. Our next goal would be to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We know that anytime we talk about culture or ethnicity, race, privilege, they can be really uncomfortable topics, but they're also things that make us all who we are and really add to our community, add to the great things that we're doing. So we want to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, know that this is a safe space. We are all continuing to learn. And so maybe we won't get it right the first time or the second time or the third time, but as long as we continue to be comfortable in that space, that is the important piece. And then lastly, we want to become more self-aware. Ice Cube says you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. And we think in this work that you have to continuously be reflecting, continuously be checking in with how you identify who you are, and just really being aware of yourself. So those are our goals. Let's look at it. So how we kind of divide this training in or this conversation, we use a lot of different resources. Some of those are going to be from what was previously Teaching for Tolerance, and they've recently changed their name to Learning for Justice. In 1991, they were created to really prevent the growth of hate by reducing prejudice. So they do a lot of work in the community with educators, with families, with students on really how we continue to reduce these prejudice and these biases. So they have these 4 domains of how we can be more anti-bias. The first one is identity. Again, some of that self-reflection, being self-aware, creating your own positive social identities. Then the next one is looking at diversity and understanding that there is great joy and comfort and wonderful things can come from that diversity. The next 2 are kind of the big, like, what's next, right, is the justice. So understanding that with diversity comes some sorts of privilege and powers and stereotypes. And then we have policies and things that are in place, and sometimes those can be unfair for some groups and how that really impacts those groups. And then the last step is the action, right? So what do we do next? How do we make movement towards reducing these prejudice or addressing these bias and really making somewhere for all humans to thrive and feel respected and seen? So we're going to start with identity, and we've got a little interactive game for you all. So if you all can go to www.menti.com, you're going to input this code, and then I want you to give us like 3 words of how you identify. And just go ahead and put those in, and we'll look at that a little bit later. So I'll give you guys a second www.minty.com, and then there's that code. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to put it in the chat just in case.
Yep, will do.
Awesome. And then Ron, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let me bring up my notes here. All right, so.
Sorry, Jania, can you pop the code in real quick? I missed that.
Oh, sorry, I'll go back to it because I can't see the chat box where I am.
All right, you're good. Got it.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So, while we're doing that, how do I identify? Would you identify by your race, your religion, your sexuality, your gender, your neighborhood? All or none of these, and how do these pieces of your identity influence who you are? I'm sure everyone has answered that question a little bit differently, and that's what makes us us. And it's important to understand that your peers and our students, they identify differently than what you judge of their appearance. But that acknowledgement is cultural competence. Just because someone may look Hispanic, understand that there's more than one Hispanic country and with their own culture, with their own traditions, and some with their own languages and dialects. So that conversation starts with identifying, figuring out how we identify.
Absolutely. So these pieces of identity then turn into our culture, right? And how we identify ourselves as part of our culture. Merriam-Webster defines culture as customary beliefs, norms, material traits, racial, religious, those sorts of things. And then we look at the National Education Association, because we are educators and we're part of the school district, looking at what that definition is. And really, it's the sum of all of these experiences, right? It's not necessarily just your race or your ethnicity or just your socioeconomic status or just your sexual identity, but it's really all of those. And so understanding that each individual has a different culture, but then also depending on where you are, there might be a different culture, right? Looking at Seminole County culture versus maybe the culture in Orange County, or looking at particular schools and kind of the culture there, the culture in different classrooms, and just really being mindful of that and understanding that's an important piece of building relationships, is recognizing the different culture, and being willing to kind of ask more questions, and build those relationships along with culture. So we're going to play a little game here. This is the uncomfortable piece, or one of those uncomfortable pieces. So I'm sure some of you have heard of the Put a Finger Down challenge. It was really big during quarantine and the pandemic on social media, specifically TikTok. But we're going to use this in the comfort of your own home or wherever you are. Go ahead and put up 10 fingers, and I'm going to read 10 statements to you. If one of those statements you agree with, or it's true for you, if you identify with that statement, I want you to go ahead and put a finger down. Of course, if you don't identify with it, then keep that finger up, okay? So everybody put up your 10 fingers. The first statement, if you put a finger down if you are not the racial or ethnic majority in Seminole County. Put a finger down if your name has ever been mispronounced. Put a finger down if you never graduated from high school. Put a finger down if you ever had to come out or lie about your sexuality. Put a finger down if you are not a man. Put a finger down if you have ever not received a job or promotion due to the color of your skin. Put a finger down if you do not have a salaried job. Put a finger down if your parents are not married. Put a finger down if you have ever needed to seek mental health services. Last one, put a finger down if you have ever been questioned about your identities. So I want you to take a second and look at your fingers, think about some of the questions that I just asked you. And I would say if you have at least one finger up, that means you benefit inherently from some sort of privilege. I know a lot of times we talk about white privilege and that being very real, but there are also other privileges that we hold based off of our gender or our sexuality, where we grew up, or the education that we have. And it's just really important in this self-awareness work and this reflection to understand how those different privileges really impact relationships that we build.
Yeah, and I have a thing about this. I remember during the height of the Me Too movement, I learned I had more privileges than I realized. I remember reading through articles and comments people were posting online and how they were relating to it. And I remember there was this one comment of the woman. She mentioned having to be careful when she would go out past sundown. Like, she had specific strategies, like letting someone know she was leaving if she had to go out, or having her keys ready before getting to the car so that she can open the door, get in real quickly, and things like that. And when I was reading through it, I realized I'd never really ever had to worry about things like that. Like if I left home at night to, like, for instance, need to go to the gas station to fill up on gas before the next day, or if I wanted to go out in the middle of the night because we were having an impromptu movie night and I went out to get snacks and stuff. Like that sort of thing never, like me leaving out at night and having to worry about my safety was never something that came across my mind. So it really opened my eyes to, understanding that we all have privileges that we may not even realize. And, another one being Hispanic, but also being born here. So I know the language, I'm fluent in English, where I have family that wasn't born here and they don't have that privilege. So understand that we all have some sort of privilege that we may or may not be even aware about.
Absolutely. So with all of those different pieces of your identity and your culture, the cultures that you are connected to, looking at your different privileges and powers, it really creates a space for us to benefit from diversity, right? Maya Angelou says it's really great. In diversity, there's beauty and there's strength. And so we all have different pieces, right? They're all, everything, we are all different. None of us are exactly the same. And it really allows us an opportunity to create spaces where we can be more innovative, we can be more creative, we can build different relationships and really grow as a community.
Yeah, and I've read there's been several studies that were conducted by various groups, research groups, and business research groups, and they all kind of come across similar conclusions. When you have a group of individuals who come from similar backgrounds and experiences, you'll get better cooperation out of them, but you get less innovation. However, if the opposite is true, if you have a group of individuals who with different backgrounds and different experiences, then you get more out of the box thinking and more innovation from that group.
So let's take a moment and look at the diversity in Seminole County. I'm going to show you guys some student demographics and then also our staff demographics. So you see here on one side, we have our students broken up by race, and then also our teachers. And so this is just our instructional staff, not our non-instructional staff. Take a second. So I think our student demographic is it mirrors pretty closely to the rest of the country, right? Places for us to be more diverse, but pretty much looking like the rest of the United States. And then our teacher demographic, not as much. There are definitely some spaces where we have opportunities for more diversity in education, for us to have more teachers that represent our student community as well. And so this kind of shows places where we have opportunities to build cross-cultural relationships, but then we also may have some challenges in that as well. There may not be teachers necessarily in certain schools that represent the students in that school, or the teacher demographic, racial demographic may not match up with the student racial demographic as well.
Yeah, and I think in another slide, we're going to talk about how that can affect our students. And I know whenever we talk about teachers with In terms of race and not matching with their students, there was a study that was done, and I'll bring it up again in the future slide when it comes across, I believe, where it was looking at how class size would affect student achievement outcomes. And in setting it up, they realized this was a good opportunity as well to gauge how race affected student achievement in terms of same race. So if a student had a teacher that was the same race, how would that affect the achievement long term? And what they found was, particularly with Black boys, if they had an elementary school teacher that was also a Black male, they showed more achievement, more progress, better grades than if it was a Black male student and they didn't have a Black male teacher. But they also did find that when teachers can make that conscious effort to make that connection with these students that don't match their race, that extra attention, that extra effort to build that relationship and build that bond with those students, then that gap closed a bit. So it kind of shows you just one aspect in that and how that can impact our students.
There are definitely different places where this can impact either for the best or for the worst, definitely positive and negative interactions based off of this data. So we're gonna actually watch a clip here in a second. If any of you have children, which we probably do, you've possibly have seen the movie Zootopia. And so this is a really great movie, one for us to share and be able to have these conversations about diversity and stereotypes and really the impact. And so we're gonna watch this clip, and I kind of want you guys just to think about what you're seeing in it, and we'll go over some of its themes here. So hold on a second.
Please? Yes. What I mean is, thousands of years ago, predators survived through their aggressive hunting instincts. For whatever reason, they seem to be reverting back to their primitive savage ways. Of course. Are you gonna try? Something happened again. It is possible. So we must be vigilant, and we at the ZPD are prepared and are here to protect you.
Oh, I think you said plenty.
What do you mean?
Clearly there's a biological component. These predators may be reverting back to their primitive savage ways. Are you serious?
I just stated the facts of the case. I mean, it's not like a bunny could go savage.
Right, but a fox could, huh?
Nick, stop it. You're not like them.
Oh, there's a them now.
Please? Yes. Please? Yes. What I mean is...
There you go. All right, so in this video, you guys see the bunny as
thousands of years ago.
Not to play.
Predators survived.
Let's try this. Okay, there we go. Sorry. But in this video, you see Officer Bunny is doing sort of a press conference about the predators that are going missing, right? And so some background is that Officer Bunny comes from a town where there's not a lot of diversity. Mostly, I think it's actually called Bunny Town, where everybody's pretty much a bunny. And so she's never been really exposed to differences. But what she does have when she leaves to go to the big city is lots of kind of conversation with her parents, and where her parents are sharing different stereotypes about the different predators. You can see that there's lots of stereotypes in this video, generalizations, and then also just showing more of these pictures of animals that are maybe different than Bunny in not such positive lights. So this, I mean, it speaks to kind of how we have these different experiences, how we have influence from all around us that really shape how we see the world, how we interact with different groups. And if you haven't been exposed to diversity, all you really have is kind of what either your parents or your family or what you've seen in the media. Perception is definitely almost reality in to some extent, where you maybe you don't have that experience, but you're seeing this around, or you're seeing this on the news, and you just build these kind of biases, right? So let's talk about the definition of implicit bias. So it's attitudes and stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, our decisions in an unconscious manner. I think that's the most important thing, that it's not intentionally teaching difference or intentionally teaching these stereotypes, but something that happens unconscious, because we are humans and we walk different paths and we have different experiences. So these things happen, these implicit bias happen.
Yeah, and implicit bias is, your life of experiences and your culture shaping the way you perceive and judge others. Again, they're automatic, a lot of times unconscious, but they can impact, stereotypic associations with race or other groups and affect our perceptions, judgments, decision makings, and behaviors. I mean, institutional examples like scheduling and conferences, some things that you would normally think would be biased in any kind of way, but depending on that person's experiences and history, it can be affected. There's an implicit association test, and it's commonly used to measure implicit bias across many identifiers. Implicit bias often shape the way we interact with each other and our students. An example of the presence of implicit bias is shown in misconduct data.
Absolutely. So what Ron's talking about as far as some of that misconduct data is some of these like systematic inequalities, right? We have systematic inequalities. We've heard this term, but it makes life, or the NEA says that it makes life more difficult for so many of our communities. And then it also exists in some of our schools, codified in some of our rules and our laws and our policies. We give those examples of kind of some of that misconduct data, or how we define misconduct in certain actions that are defined as misconduct, and them kind of being a little subjective, right? And then also looking at things as simple as like the school day schedule. It's not something that's meant to be biased or to be unequal for families, but not every family can then meet those timeframes, right? And so then you're looking at additional resources like after school and hoping that you have those resources to be able to meet the needs of your student and then also your family. So just being aware of some of those systematic inequalities and how sometimes we say that this is like the rule or the policy for our school district, but making sure that we're working to make sure that that is equitable for all of our families. So let's look at some more statistics.
Yeah, so looking at this slide, Black students are more likely to be expelled or suspended from school. In 2012, Black students made up 16% of the total US school population, but they were subject of 42% of all school suspensions. Black students had a higher chance of being given a disciplinary action at 31% compared to, non-Black students.
So that's US statistics. So let's look and see kind of where Seminole County falls with that. So it looks like we're kind of meeting the norm of the rest of the country, which is not something that we are proud of. That is partly why we have these conversations and why we look at this data, is because we want to be better than the rest of the country. We want to be better than the state and the districts around us. I'm very proud of Seminole County Public Schools, and we do a lot to make sure that on different metrics, we are better than the rest, right? But we are still struggling here. You can see that although we only have 15% of our students are identified as Black, they're still making up almost half of our misconduct data. And so that's getting infractions, referrals, getting suspensions, those sorts of things. So there's still definitely overrepresentation of our Black students in our misconduct data. So let's look at why that is happening.
So there's, lots of reasons. There's been some research that's supported teachers perceiving Black students' behaviors to be more hostile than those of other students. systemic inequalities, implicit and explicit biases, and zero tolerance to presumption and regular practice of removing disruptive students from school. And anytime there's any kind of subjective reasoning or disciplinary action because of something that was observed subjectively, there's room for implicit bias. So like tone of voice, expression, the way students express their emotion, like lots of different things can factor in, and those are where those implicit biases kind of sneak in.
So these different systematic inequalities, these implicit bias and them showing up in our misconduct data really impact our students, right? Of course, it makes students have negative perceptions of school, of learning, not wanting to come to school. So then we see them either becoming truancy issues or eventually dropping out. It definitely increases the achievement gap and tracks our students, tracks our Black students for lower courses, lower level courses. It increases the likelihood of involvement in the criminal justice system because once you've had all of these incidents with misconduct, with discipline, and then you have this negative perception, you stop coming to school. Well, if you're not in school, chances are that you're not at home making great choices, right? And so we've pushed you out of school because we haven't necessarily checked our biases and made sure that our policies are equitable and equal for all of our students. Then you see our students going into the criminal justice system or continuing to be expelled and not being able to really see the hope in their future. So what do we do for this, right? We have these conversations, and then we also acknowledge our students' cultures. We immerse ourselves in their cultures, either the neighborhood that they're coming from, the different ethnicity that they have, and really learn more about them so that we can understand how different misconduct codes really affect our students, right? If we feel that a student is being disrespectful, well, maybe let's have more of a conversation about that, because maybe at home that's not disrespectful. And so really learning more about their culture. I know Ron has a really great story about how learning more about your culture can really affect your life, your work, right?
Yeah. So this story is about my mom. So when I was in high school, my mom we always have our chats about how our days are going, how school going, and how work was going. Frequently, fairly often, she would vent to me about her supervisor, who she believed was very rude and always had an attitude with her. And I always thought this was like strange because my mom was she always came off very nice and very sociable. She liked to be friendly with people, start conversations. So I never really understood what was going on there. We'll fast forward a couple of years, and she's looking to retire. And on her last day of work, she told me she had to say to her goodbyes, and she ended up having a really good heart-to-heart talk with her supervisor. So come to find out, her supervisor had the same perception my mom had of the supervisor. Her supervisor thought the same about my mom. So again, when she told me that, I'm like, wait, what? What kind of person are you at work? Are you different at home? So when they got to talking about it, and she realized what the issue was. So because English is not my mom's first language, and because she was not born and raised in the US, her manner of speaking, her tone of voice, and word choice can come off as confrontational and direct because of the language barrier. Not just in how she says words, but the vocabulary as well can come off a bit direct. So her supervisor picked this up as rude, in your face, and kind of with a bit of an attitude. But that was never the intention. That my mom isn't the type of person to be mean or have an attitude with anybody. So they ended up having that conversation, and the supervisor mentioned that to my mom, and my mom mentioned, well, this is why, maybe this is why you're picking that up. And the supervisor was like, oh, okay, I can definitely understand, see that. So they could have avoided like years and years of, awkwardness and confrontation and like, those situations if they both kind of went to each other and had that conversation and talked about what's going on, and they maybe could have gotten to that cultural component of it and understood what was going on. So from then on, now I notice whenever my mom is talking with somebody that doesn't also speak Spanish, when you can see she's kind of trying, she'll stop every now and then like to collect her thoughts and think about what she wants to say and how she wants to say it. And if she doesn't have the vocabulary, she'll say, I don't know if this is the right word, and then she'll say whatever it is she needs to say. But she'll preface that if it's something serious she wants to talk about, she'll preface that, understand English is not my first language. So if I say something, please let me know. And then she'll do her best to correct herself.
That's a really good example about learning about the people that you're interacting with, whether that's students learning about other students that they're in class with, or teachers learning about students, or even teachers learning about teachers, because we're all different, right? And so learning those things and having those conversations can really clear up some communication and help us build those relationships. So we like to give some resources, and these are, so it says teacher resources, but I think they can apply across the board, really, or supporting our teachers and getting these resources and sharing those with them. So the activity down at the bottom is what I wish my teacher knew. And so we see that used in multiple different grade levels. We see that used with teachers or with social workers, with counselors. I mean, really anybody can use this. And it allows an opportunity for students to tell us more about them, right? And maybe not in that direct, like, hey, tell me about yourself, because not every student's going to be comfortable with that, right? Or not even every teacher is going to be comfortable saying, hey, tell me about yourself. But this is a good start to giving them maybe a piece of paper, and we see it in elementary schools where sometimes they're drawing a picture because maybe they're not quite writing yet or their handwriting's not right. And then even up into our high schools where you can write something here of like, hey, what do I wish my teacher knew? And just giving little pieces of your background and your culture, you can share that with them. Then we also have here the culturally responsive classroom, or standard-based teaching. And so I really like this book because it has a lot of different assessments that we can use as teachers. One, to look at what we really loved about the classrooms that we grew up in, and things that maybe we didn't really like. It talks about different structures in the classroom that may not be culturally responsive, and then how can we change those? How can we really take a second to be more self-aware and make sure that we're building these relationships? And then one of my favorites right now is the innocent classroom. And so Altamont Elementary actually introduced me to this book, and they did a book study on it. And really it talks about finding the innocence in every child. There's good and there is something exceptional in every single student. So taking a second to kind of reflect on our own biases and finding what's good about that student. Like, there may be some things that aren't necessarily great, but there's something good. And that's what we really have to hone in on to build those great relationships with our students. So let's see, as we build those relationships and have those conversations, of course, it sounds a lot easier than it may be, because there's bound to be opportunities where that cross-cultural communication, maybe there's something that says that is a miscommunication. Maybe there are feelings that are involved and feelings that are hurt, those sorts of things. But this really just talks about the dynamics of those differences and understanding that it may go wrong, but then understanding what we can do next. So this clip isn't going to work, but it's a really good spot to see where one animal may say something that they've learned about this culture, and maybe the person in that culture, like you, aren't supposed to be saying that, and having that moment to apologize and say, hey, I'm sorry, this went wrong. I think Ron was talking about that of, hey, like, English isn't my first language, so maybe I said that wrong, or maybe I'm not really familiar with your culture, so can you tell me more about that? And really being genuine and asking those questions, because you know that something went wrong. I typically tell the story about my hair, and like, my hair is great. I really love my hair. And a lot of people do. I understand why. But sometimes people come to like talk or touch my hair, or maybe say the wrong thing about my hair. And so I've learned to kind of have those conversations in a very respectful manner of, hey, I don't like when you touch my hair. It's my being. And that's okay for me to say. And it's also something that maybe that person didn't know. But it took a long time to get there. Because you don't want to be disrespectful. You don't want to embarrass somebody. So empowering our students to have those conversations and to embrace their culture and have their own positive identities, but then also for the adults that are interacting with them, to also empower them to do that, but also know that, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, or let's talk about that a little bit more and why you don't like that.
Yeah, and it can even be as simple as, pronouncing a name, correctly for some students. Having that courage, and it might not seem like a big deal, but especially if you're from another country and you don't have a standard American name, it could be something that could be part of your identity, where it's like, no, this is how you pronounce, my name, and it is a big deal when students are able to find that courage to stand up and say, this is how I say it, and this is how I would like to say, without having, being rude or anything like that. So yeah. So verbal decision points, situations which increase proportionally tend to occur due to implicit biases, situations in which students' behavior is subjective. Again, anytime there's a situation where there's any room for subjectivity, we're going to be putting in our biases based on our experiences, based on everything that we've kind of been exposed to up to that specific point. There's situations where discretionary judgment is also involved in classifying the intensity of a student's behavior. Like overreacting to reminder behavior by a Black student, defiance and disrespect, fighting versus physical contact. All these points, there could be some wiggle room in there for subjectivity, and once it turns into that, then we're going to see some implicit biases at play.
Absolutely. This is about the kind of the point where you decide that it's going to be one or the other, right? And looking at things. And I think good examples of that are things that we've seen in like our country, right? And really taking a moment to say, am I judging this differently because of who is doing that, or because of where that person has come from? Or am I really looking at this with just the facts and understanding that needs to be applied in judging whether it's this or that? These are like huge decision points that we like people to take a second and look at that second thought. Then we also use or encourage the use of the empathetic discipline intervention. And so we encourage like our deans and our teachers and those sorts to kind of look at this, right? And really getting kind of the perspective of the student about what has happened, and using these discipline interventions more as a relationship builder than necessarily consequence, but really taking a moment to rebuild the relationship and teaching the student, hey, this behavior may not be most appropriate, but how do we build this relationship so that it doesn't happen again? How do we build the relationship so you understand what is appropriate at school and maybe what is not? And I mean, anytime that you give a student a consequence, there's the chance that it may break your relationship. And then that's not helping you or the school or the student. So really just being empathetic with some of our students and understanding where they're coming from, and then making discipline based off of that. And then
go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say, encourage higher grade students to encourage lower grade students to do better and help address anxieties. These are examples. Results suggest that social belonging is a psychological lever where a targeted intervention can have broad consequences that lessen inequalities in achievement and health. Negative outcomes reinforce lack of belonging, and positive outcomes reinforce sense of belonging. So it's all about building that relationship, keeping that relationship intact. You know, as a mental health worker, I do a lot of counseling with our students, and come across lots of situations where kind of students were talking to me about you know, confrontations, altercations, whether with peers, teachers, or adults outside the school. And a big chunk of them, we talk about communicating from a perspective of try to get to express how you feel so that the other person can understand without us pointing fingers. You know, because once we start pointing fingers to the other party will immediately shut down, defense up, wall up. Now what we say has less meaning regardless if it's the objective truth and fact.
So we see this, that as we look at this anti-bias work and this cultural competency and this implicit bias work, is that it really takes an institutionalizing of this cultural knowledge, right? We can all do our very best as individuals, but it's also something that has to come within our policies and within these big systems. And the more that we continue to have these conversations, the more that we continue to adapt to better serve our diverse populations, the better we will be. I like the graphic at the bottom that this is a continuum. Like we said at the beginning, this is a conversation starter. This is by no means the end of it, and we're not all cured of our bias and understand all of it. But it's definitely something to continue to work on, to continue to grow. So I'm going to show you guys this last clip, I think.
When I was a kid, I thought Zootopia was this perfect place where everyone got along and anyone could be anything. Turns out, real life's a little bit more complicated than a slogan on a bumper sticker. Real life is messy. We all have limitations. We all make mistakes, which means, hey, glass half full, we all have a lot in common. And the more we try to understand one another, the more exceptional each of us will be. But we have to try. So no matter what type of animal you are, from the biggest elephant to our first fox, I implore you, try. Try to make the world a better place. Look inside yourself and recognize that change starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with all of us.
Right. So what you saw in that last clip was really the bunny saying, I mean, kind of what we've been repeating is that we all start off thinking that the world is this great sunshine and sunflowers place. But as we grow, as we have experiences, our views change, right? We all experience things differently. These stereotypes and these biases are seated in us, and it's part of life, right? It's part of walking this journey. But the more that we try to understand each other, the more that we try to find the innocence in each other and learn about what makes us different, the better we can be, because we all have something special. We all have something exceptional that helps our community grow and thrive. And it's just really important that we continue to have these conversations so that we can continue to do that. I want to show you guys our Minty, but it's being a little exceptional with me. So hold on a second. But Ron, you have anything?
Well, I can take a look at some of the questions here. Let me see. Let me go up to the top. Let's see. Happens to our students at our school daily, teachers mispronouncing their names. Oh, yeah. I've had my name mispronounced several times, and I know my cousin who was born in Peru, his name is spelled R-O-D-E-R, pronounced Rode. and he had an interesting time in high school having teachers and students trying to pronounce his name. So yeah, it happens all the time. Is this training being provided in the schools? Yeah, we've provided this training several times to a lot of our teachers, staff at different schools. I know Jania has provided the training herself recently, several times to different schools. I know summertime is big training time for a lot of our teachers because they have way more time during the summertime to do these type of trainings, and we've been offering it during the summer too, when COVID allows, that is. Yeah, thanks, is awesome. Well done. Thanks. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun researching and getting the material ready for this training. A lot of it's been eye-opening for us as well, especially a lot of the statistics and stuff. Yeah, we really enjoy giving this training.
Yeah. If you have, I know a lot of us are PTA members, and so if you feel that this would be beneficial to your school, feel free to either reach out to us and let us know what school you think that might be, or reach out to the leadership team at your school and just let them know that you participated in this, and we're happy to arrange some times. I know, like Ron was saying, I've been at a couple of elementary schools, middle schools, and a high school coming, and just making sure that we're able to spread it as much as possible and really have that second to have this conversation and spark some of these ideas as we continue to move forward. Yeah, so I did share our Menti. I think you guys can see it. Can you see it?
Yeah, I see it on my screen
cool.
here.
Yeah, so you guys are welcome. I'm going to leave it open for a while so you guys can add more things to it. But it really just speaks to the point that we are all so different. Like everybody has something different. I think there's only one, maybe two words that were repeated, but there's all different things about how we identify. And just important to remember that, like some of these things you couldn't see if you just saw somebody walking down the street. Like I couldn't see that you were an advocate. I couldn't see that you were self-reflective, right? And those are really important pieces of who we are as human beings. And so just making sure that we continue to acknowledge that it's more than just what you see on the outside, more than the stereotypes and the biases that we've been fed, and how do we then like combat that, yeah. I will say the name thing is huge for me. I think that's my second one past my hair, is that oftentimes my name is mispronounced. And so really, I think encouraging or empowering your student to continue to correct people. I know that it's draining and it's tiring, but it's your name and it's extremely important, right? It's a piece of your identity. It's who you are, and you will have it forever. So just continuing to encourage that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Did you guys, when you were doing research, did you find any, that's why I had put up there about parent and teacher interaction. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name first.
Jania?
Not Jania. Not you, Jania.
I know. I was like, I think I know you. Sorry, I can't see the screen, so
yeah.
I don't know what's happening.
Oh, I'm gonna say your name wrong.
Ronald. Ronald, yeah.
Ronald, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Did you, when you were doing, you gave the statistics regarding like the black male teacher and the black male student, like how he does better because he had a black male student. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question was, did you come across any statistics of having the same ethnicity, like a teacher having the same ethnicity as the parent? Like, does that play a role in the student doing better, or even like parent kind of like interaction, like their interaction together?
I haven't seen any of that with terms of ethnicity or culture. A lot of the research I found was in terms of race, but the reasoning could be applied, I presume, to ethnicity and culture as well. Is they saw that the the black boys were able to see black male teachers and kind of see themselves and see what they could aspire to, despite whatever was going on at home or in their community, able to have that positive role model that in a professional role. I think that was one of the driving forces, and I believe the same could be applied to if students identify with the same ethnicity or same culture as well. That would be my assumption. That it's not, I didn't see any research based on that though, but yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of times I've seen some things just about even like in healthcare, right? And having the same race or like a physician that's from the same culture or background of you. So I would imagine that some of that also holds true with like the teacher and the family, that there's opportunities for more growth or more success in those situations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need more Black male teachers. Yes, yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any more questions or comments or?
No, I will do a quick shameless plug though, because Black male teachers, I see the comment about being such a small minority of the population in PTA. We are one of the most active parent groups in the school. We have very few men at all, let alone men of color. So if you are a parent or you know someone, like if you want to volunteer your husband or your brother or your uncle, you don't have to be a parent to be a volunteer, and you don't have to volunteer in PTA either. But these kids need more men in their lives, showing that they care about the schools. So that's my shameless plug.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's something that in mental health, we look at that too, and kind of where our Black and brown providers and our teachers and our volunteers. And so I think part of it too, and that's just me coming in, and it's in my identity as a Black woman, is that sometimes it's really difficult to enter spaces that you don't see others that are like you. And so it's kind of this never ending kind of like cycle of, well, if there were more, then we would get more, but then there aren't more. And it's very difficult. But I think the more we have these conversations, the more that we are genuine about really wanting to see that diversity, hopefully we'll see those margins move. Real men join the PTA. That's cute.
Thank you, Marisa.
We're gonna have that as a slogan.
I like it.
See what happens.
I'm hearing next year's t-shirts. Like that's
yeah, I was like, put it on a t-shirt. It'll be great.
That's a good one.
If there's no other questions, I will stop the recording. And I just want to say thank you very much to Jania and Ron. We appreciate this so much. This was a great presentation. And we've been in these schools a while, and there's still new information that comes out of these. So fantastic learning experience. I really appreciate it.